Everybody, Chuck Holton here. I'm coming to you from Erbil, Iraq tonight, where I am on my way to Syria, and I'm going to be reporting from there for the next week or so. And so you're going to want to stay tuned for that. CBN should have some of that reporting without a doubt, since it's CBN's trip. So, but that's not what I'm here to talk about tonight. What I'm here to talk about tonight is the explosion that took place this morning in Bandar Abbas, Iran. That's this morning your time. And that explosion was quite a doozy. That's putting it mildly. We're going to talk about the explosive power of that thing that blew up and what it was and what the implications are of this explosion. And so you're going to want to stick around for this, because the world is watching and wondering whether or not this was intentional, whether it was a false flag, or whether or not it was just an accident. Somebody shouldn't have been smoking near these containers of powerful explosive. Now, I did a live about this about half an hour ago over on my channel at The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton here on YouTube, and you can go watch that one if you like later. If you want to get my reporting first, you want to go to chuckholton.com or go to The Hot Zone on YouTube and subscribe over there. chuckholton.com is the best place, because there are a lot of things I can't show you on YouTube. Unfortunately, they demonetize us for the smallest thing, and so we have to be very careful about what we show, other than just me flapping my gums on camera. And I get it. You know, I'd rather show you what's going on than tell you what's going on. But unfortunately, in this format, we just can't do that with YouTube. So we have to kind of, you know, put that stuff up somewhere else. So that somewhere else is chuckholton.com, HOLTON, chuckholton.com. And you go over there and you can watch video of the explosion that I'm going to be talking about in this live. Now, please make sure you hit that like button, folks. And that tells YouTube more people need to watch this. It also would be helpful if you just tell us where you're watching from. Put that in the chat, and that'll really get the chat rate up, and that's good for the algorithm as well. Okay. So let's just back up and talk about what happened today with this explosion. So it happened in Bandar Abbas, which is down in the southern part of Iran. And I probably can show you that without getting in trouble. So if we look at a map of Iran, and I'm just gonna do this the old-fashioned way. I don't know if you can, maybe that's too bright. There, that's better. Okay, so there's Iran. Bandar Abbas is down here in the very bottom in what is the Gulf of Oman, or the Bab el-Mandab Straits, just across from Dubai. If you've ever been through Dubai on a layover going somewhere, you were right across from the port city of Bandar Abbas. Now, that is a civilian port. That is not a military port. There are other military bases around, naval bases and things like that for the Iranian Navy. But Bandar Abbas is a civilian port that handles 85% of all the container traffic that comes and goes from Iran. And that's significant, without a doubt. And that means there are tens of thousands of containers that are in Bandar Abbas at any given time. Now, obviously, those things are a challenge to get, to keep track of. Some people were saying on the live that I did on my channel that I was frozen. That's because the power went out here, and so my phone switched over to data, to cellular data, which was not fast enough. But now I've pulled out the Starlink, and I'm connected with the Starlink, so it should be good. We should have a pretty good connection for this live, okay? So the fact that this is a civilian port in Bandar Abbas says that there shouldn't be any military hardware or ammunition or equipment or anything at that port. That's kind of the rule. And the fact that there was, they say, it was like 20, how many containers was that? It was a large number of containers, 24 containers of and it's not actually an explosive, it's an oxidizer called sodium perchlorate. Sodium perchlorate is not explosives, but it is used in explosives. It's used specifically in the solid rocket fuel that's put into missiles by Iran that then get fired at Israel, like they did in April and in October of last year. And as you know, Israel's response in October, on October 26th or whatever it was last year, was to take out not only all of Iran's air defense capability, but to also take out their ability to make this solid rocket fuel. They had a couple of plants available where they could make this stuff into rocket fuel, and those were all destroyed in that attack by Israel. So Iran doesn't have the ability to replace the missiles, the fuel for the missiles that it fired at Israel at this point. And obviously they're looking for a way to do that so that they can replenish their stockpiles and live to fight another day. However, so they're going to have to get it from outside of Iran, but these 24 containers of sodium perchlorate was perchlorate, sorry, not percolate, perchlorate, was sent to them from China. Now, I didn't get a chance to talk about this very much on the last live, but look, that's a big deal, folks, because there is a very small use, non-military use for sodium perchlorate. Very small. So like enough that you could put in a carry-on bag, which you wouldn't, of course, but you know, that amount of sodium perchlorate could handle all of the industrial use of that chemical for a long time, years, in Iran. So the only reason they're bringing it in is obviously to make solid rocket fuel for their missiles. And China knows that. And China is party to a UN treaty that's a weapons non-proliferation treaty that says if there's a chemical that is a dual-use chemical that could be used for military purposes, and then you can't send it to a country that's under sanctions unless you get permission ahead of time to do so. And obviously they didn't get permission ahead of time to do so. With that in mind, China may have just broken the sanctions that have been put on Iran, and that would make, theoretically, China open to sanctions as well. Like the world body, the United Nations, the United States, other Western countries should be putting sanctions on China right away because they are selling. I mean, look, President Trump today, Steve Witkoff, is in Oman for the third round of peace talks or ceasefire talks with Iran about getting rid of their nuclear program. And obviously, President Trump wants those talks to succeed. Well, China sending these dangerous chemicals with pretty much only a military use into Iran right now is directly working against peace. There's no two ways about that. Now, China could gin up some plausible deniability by saying, well, that was sent by a company that did it off the books and we didn't know about it. But everybody knows that every Chinese company has to be open to spying by the PRC. And so if it could be proven that it was a PRC-linked company, or at least one that was, you know, closely tied to the CCP, well, then you're talking about willful abrogation or willful going against the treaty that China is a signatory to help stop the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. And that means that they're arming, for all intents and purposes, Iran against Israel. That means China and Israel should be enemies. That means the United States, I'm sorry, China and Israel. Yeah, China and Israel should be enemies, and the United States and China should be enemies as well. And so there ought to be consequences for China because this chemical was sent to Iran. Now, we've known since that, because those chemicals showed up in the port of Bandar Abbas on March 30th. And it doesn't say how we know that, but that ship came directly from Shanghai without a military escort, according to Amir Tsarfati. So that's, like I say, a smoking gun against China that needs to be followed up on without a doubt. Because now let's ask the next question, which is, first of all, let me just reiterate, because we got 2,500 people online now. There was a large explosion in a port in Bandar Abbas, Iran, today. The explosion was made up of something called sodium perchlorate, which is a rocket fuel that came from China. So now you're caught up. They're saying over 1,000 injuries. A large portion of the port was destroyed, or at least a significant portion of it. And the port has been completely shut down for the indefinite future while they do an investigation and everything. Not only that, but sodium perchlorate is a very highly toxic substance. And when you see the videos of the explosion itself, which I can't exactly show you here because it will get the video demonetized, but I did put it up over at chuckholton.com. The color of that explosion is bright orange. Did you see that? Bright orange. That's really bad. If you ever see a fire with bright orange smoke, you probably want to get away from that fire. And the explosive power of 24 containers of sodium perchlorate is equal to the explosive power of about 1,200 tons of ammonium nitrate. Okay, did you get me there? Did you hear that? Now let's go back to the explosion that happened in Beirut back in 2020, because you probably remember that. They say it was one of the most powerful non-nuclear explosions in history. It put 300,000 people out of their homes, destroyed the port in downtown Beirut. I've been to that port. And killed, I don't know, is it 200 and something people, and something like 17,000 people injured or something like that. It was ridiculous. Okay, and you go back and watch the videos of that explosion at the port in Beirut, and it's just like, wow, that was enormous. Well, at first they said that explosion was caused by 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate, which was stored at the port incorrectly. And that's fertilizer. Ammonium nitrate is fertilizer. And that's what caused the explosion. Well, in subsequent investigation by the US FBI, what they found is that there wasn't actually 2,750 tons there. There was about 480 tons there. And the rest of it had just sort of gone away somehow. We're not really sure where it went. We can guess, because that stuff can be put into missiles and rockets and drones and explosives of all kinds, and IEDs and things like that. And who do we know in Lebanon who might use rockets and drones and IEDs? Huh. The Mossad. Yeah, no, not the Mossad. No, Hezbollah. The Mossad just uses beepers, and that okay. But, so if that gigantic explosion, which put 300,000 people out of their homes in downtown Beirut, was only about 500 tons of ammonium nitrate, then if this is true, and there were 24 containers of sodium perchlorate, in the port of Bandar Abbas, that equates to, let's see, I figured it out. Did the math here. That equates to something like 480 tons of sodium perchlorate. Okay, so sodium perchlorate is an exponential factor more explosive than ammonium nitrate is. So that explosion in Iran should have been larger or more powerful, more destructive than the explosion that went off in Beirut. Now, it was certainly a very powerful explosion, but the videos that have come out so far of that explosion show a massive, massive fireball, but then a tremendous amount of orange smoke. What that says is that it was what they call like a low order detonation, which means that not all of the material that was there actually exploded or burned. And that means that a whole lot of sodium perchlorate was actually thrown up into the atmosphere as smoke or debris. Now, that is significant and very, very bad because, as I said, sodium perchlorate is incredibly toxic. 1 teaspoon of sodium perchlorate in 1,000 gallons of water would kill everything in that water. All bacteria, all viruses, everything in that water. And they actually use it for that, for industrial purposes. You wouldn't ever use that for purifying drinking water because the sodium perchlorate is far more toxic than the bugs that it might kill in the water. But do we know how this will affect the surrounding area? That's what I'm getting to right now, Mama Marissa, what this will get to, what this is going to do to the surrounding area. That sodium perchlorate is so toxic that if you put a teaspoon of it in 1,000 gallons of water, that water would be unfit for human consumption. Okay? So you don't want to put it in the water, but this explosion just happened at the port right next to the ocean. And so without a doubt, a large amount of, most likely, the sodium perchlorate went up into the atmosphere and came down into the sea surrounding the area, which means what? No fishing in the immediate area for the foreseeable future, for a while, until it sort of washes away. You don't want to eat any seafood coming from Iran anytime soon. And that could also affect Dubai. If you're in Dubai, I mean, that's a short enough distance. I don't know. I would be suspect of eating seafood that was caught off the coast of Dubai. Edward Sisson keeps asking if I can get tacos here. Yes, you can, except the one that I went to today was not open. When I was there, there was a taco place I found today, and I was like, tacos! And pulled over and jumped out and ran in to get some tacos, and it was opening soon. So it wasn't open yet. But we did have tacos here the other night that came from, I forget what restaurant, but they did have them. So completely off topic. But yes, I love tacos. You all know that I love tacos. And you can get tacos here. Okay. Now, the more concerning thing than the ocean being contaminated by the sodium perchlorate is the land being contaminated, because there's a city there. Bandar Abbas is a city with hundreds of thousands of people in it. And the port is about 20 kilometers, I think, west of the actual city. So that's good. But the port itself has thousands of people working there every day. And this sodium perchlorate that did not blow up, but just got blown sky high and came back down again, is going to be putting a fine dusting over everything in the area. And as a matter of fact, the Iranian government, which is not known for being really caring much about its people or whether or not they die from some terrible disease, they actually came out right away and said everybody in the area should wear a mask if they go outside for the time being. And that's because if you inhale the dust from sodium perchlorate, it goes into your thyroid and will destroy your thyroids. So not good. That's not something that you want to have happen. So bottom line is, it was a massive explosion. That massive explosion will cause, so far as of yet, unknown environmental damage, but there will be pretty serious environmental damage from it. It is a very damning evidence against China that shows that China is complicit in the attacks against Israel, because they're sending the raw materials to Iran to make those missiles that Iran then has been firing at Israel a couple times in the last year. The 480 tons of sodium perchlorate should not have been at the port at all, and we knew it was there. So now, since it was known to be there, now we have to go to the speculation portion of today's report. Okay, and I'm saying that right up front. Everything I say from here on out would be most likely speculation, and that's about who's responsible. Okay, now I'm a firm believer. I am not a conspiracy theorist, so I'm a firm believer in Occam's razor. If you're familiar with Occam's razor, that is the maxim that the simplest explanation is usually the correct explanation. And the simplest explanation for a disaster like this is that some idiot was smoking a cigarette where he shouldn't have been, and he tossed his butt in the wrong place, and something caught fire, and then that whole thing went low order, and kaboom, went up in smoke. That's the most likely explanation. So we're going to put that out right at the beginning. They just mishandled this. Yeah, Arthur, you're right. They just mishandled the rocket fuel, and it blew up. Okay? But you have to agree that it is a little suspicious that this happened to blow up on the very day that the United States started the third round of negotiations with Iran. Now, that, if you were a conspiracy theorist, you could jump right to the conclusion that, it was the Mossad. No question. The Mossad knew it was there. They went in, they waited until they were just about to get to these negotiations, and then kablooey, and they sent this up in smoke to distract and cause the Iranians to be suspicious of the United States or Israel being involved in this attack. And therefore, the Iranians are going to be less likely to try to make a deal. And that makes it more likely that the United States will allow Israel to go in and once and for all destroy the nuclear capabilities of Iran. And whether or not it's the truth, I can promise you there are a lot of people in Iran tonight who are thinking real hard about that. Maybe not so sure, okay? Now, we know the Mossad has the capability to do something like this. As a matter of fact, when the explosion took place in 2020 in Beirut, that was the first thing a lot of people jumped to, was like, the Mossad just blew up all of this ammonium nitrate, which Hezbollah was saving to use in rockets against Israel. Subsequent investigations have not turned up any evidence of the Mossad being involved in those explosions, but knowing what we know about the Mossad, they're probably smart enough to make something like that happen without leaving any trace. It wouldn't be hard because the stuff's unstable to begin with. So it really wouldn't be hard at all to do. So yeah, Operation Kablooey, they said, yeah. So in the same vein, the Mossad certainly has the capability to get into the port at Bandar Abbas and make something accidentally experience a sudden, rapid, spontaneous disassembly. But obviously, they're not going to admit to that. As a matter of fact, the Israeli government has already come out and said, we had nothing to do with this. And I mean, for the time being, we should probably believe them. If they did have something to do with it, they're not going to admit to it anyway. But knowing that Iranians are, they have a thing for conspiracy theories in Iran. Muslims in general have a thing for conspiracy theories. And so with that in mind, it's not unlikely that people in Iran are going to convince themselves that Israel had something to do with this. Even if they didn't, though, it certainly is in Israel's favor. It's very good for Israel what happened today in Bandar Abbas, because that is 480 tons of rocket fuel that won't be going into missiles, that won't be fired at Israel ever again. And that means that Iran now has to go looking for more sodium perchlorate in order to try to rebuild their missile stockpiles. So it's not that they don't have any left. They still have thousands of missiles left. The guess was that they had like over 3,000 missiles easily. And they've only shot maybe 500 missiles at Israel. But they don't have 3,000 missile launchers. And most of those missiles, the majority of the 3,000 missiles that they have, couldn't reach Israel. So they're more short range. And so right now, Iran desperately needs to rebuild its long-range rockets. And if they can't, that's going to put them at a distinct disadvantage in this thing. But more importantly than that, because 85% of the container traffic that goes to or comes from Iran goes through that port, shutting down that port even for a week will have a major economic impact on Iran. And without a doubt, this is going to be significant. And so we're just going to have to sit back and watch. I'm sure that more information will come out about this thing in the days and weeks to come. There will certainly be an investigation. If it's anything like the investigation in Beirut, then that investigation started in 2020 and is ongoing. It's still going on. So that means that 5 years from now, Iran's still going to be scratching its head and trying to figure out who did it. Now, one other thing I wanted to bring up. It could still have been an intentional act, even if Israel was not involved. What do I mean by that? Well, there are factions inside Iran that don't want Iran attacking Israel, that would love to see Iran's current government collapse. That being the case, those dissident groups very certainly could have had something to do with this tragedy that just happened. And so, again, we don't know. And if Iran does know, they're not going to tell anybody. They're not going to say so. So somebody was asking how much money just went up in smoke. And so I will find out for you how much was all that SP worth. I'm going to ask my smart little friend ChatGPT how much it was worth. ChatGPT can never give you a short answer. It has to show you how it gets its answer. So it says industrial grade sodium perchlorate costs about $3,000 to $5,000 per metric ton. That's actually pretty cheap. High purity sodium perchlorate can cost up to $8,000 a metric ton. So let's use a conservative middle estimate of $6,000 a metric ton. So 480 metric tons of that stuff would only be worth about $3 million. So it's not a huge it's not a huge hit financially to lose all this sodium perchlorate. However, the cleanup could cost billions because, again, not all of that sodium perchlorate went up in the explosion. It did not all burn. Much of it was spread, most likely, across that whole area, a wide area of sea and land, and contaminated the whole area. So if that's the case, it could, I mean, if Iran were to do it right, it could take weeks or months or even longer to properly clean the areas of all of the fallout from this explosion. Now, Iran being Iran, there's no way they're going to close that down for weeks or months. So they might keep it closed for a couple of days and then let people back in there. And all those people will die of thyroid poisoning at some point in the future. Could be. We don't know. But the bottom line is, this is a bad day for Iran. It's a bad day for China. And it's a very good day for Israel. So thank God for that. And you never want to see people get killed. They say, they don't even know how many people have died in this because the fire's still burning. There's still places they can't get into. And there's buildings collapsed and people stuck under the rubble and all that. So the death toll will definitely go up, without a doubt. However, they say that there are over 1,000 people wounded, and all of the local hospitals are overwhelmed with wounded. So we don't want to cheer that. That's not something to be happy about. Just like we don't cheer, or we're not happy about civilian casualties in Gaza. But again, you just have to make sure you put the blame in the right place. And putting the blame in the right place, in this case, puts it right at the feet of Iran and China. Because they shouldn't have a need for long-range missiles, because nobody's threatening Iran. Now, I mean, we are now, but I mean, before the war started, nobody was planning to bomb Iran before just recently. And so any damage, any death, any destruction that takes place in Iran because of this explosion or because of subsequent attacks by the United States and Israel is at the feet of Iran. We just have to make sure that we, just like we say, all of the death that's happened since October 7th in Gaza is the fault of Hamas, because all they have to do is give up the hostages and the war will stop. It's an easy solution, but they're not willing to do it. That being said, just as a quick side note, let's see, will the government ever change? Let's hope. As a side note, the IDF is saying that they are going to prepare a much larger force to go into Gaza, and they're really starting to pile up troops in there. I believe right now they already have more troops in Gaza than they've had at any point in the war, except for maybe right at the very beginning. But yes, you are watching live. Hello, South Africa. But can people use iodine to help with the thyroid? Yes, they could. Yeah, what it does is it just, I guess, destroys your thyroid's ability to absorb iodine or something like that. But it probably wouldn't hurt if they had, if they took a little iodine. But anyway, we don't know. But the IDF has more troops in Gaza right now than they've had at any point in this war, except maybe at the very, very beginning. But they're about to have a whole lot more. This is something I've been saying for a while. They need to just keep sending more troops and more troops and more troops. They called up about 700,000 when the war started. Now, many of those people have gone back to their civilian lives, but they still have hundreds of thousands of troops. And most of the time, they've only had in the tens of thousands in Gaza. So they could have definitely put a whole lot more troops into Gaza. And that's what I've been saying. Like, they should have just said, we're going to keep sending troops into Gaza every week. We're going to deploy another brigade to Gaza until we've got hundreds of thousands of troops in Gaza. And there won't be standing room for the Palestinians because there's going to be so many soldiers there. We're just going to keep doing that until you release the hostages. And so this is all part of that maximum pressure campaign that Israel is embarking on to make Hamas come to the negotiating table and release the hostages. So far, Hamas is not willing to lay down its arms, and even Egypt and Qatar are telling them that they need to. That's a big change. But they're saying, nope, no, non-starter. Hamas is not giving up its arms. With that in mind, Israel needs to say, okay, send another brigade. Okay, bulldoze some more houses. Okay, keep taking more land and making it into parking lot in Gaza. And just keep doing that until they release the hostages. They are also not allowing aid into Gaza. Hamas is not distributing the aid that they have. They're sitting on it. And because they want the people of Gaza to be starving right now, and that's their weapon to try to put pressure on Israel to allow more aid in. But Israel's like, we're finished supporting Hamas indirectly through allowing third parties and NGOs to take aid into Gaza, because we know that aid goes to Hamas and Hamas uses it to support their operations. So what the IDF has said is that now what we're going to do is we're going to set up our own IDF distribution centers all across Gaza. We are going to personally escort the aid into our own distribution centers, and we are going to distribute the aid directly to the people. And that way Hamas does not get to have any part of it. We won't, we're going to control it start to finish whenever we get around to actually allowing aid back into Gaza. But that's not yet. They're not allowing aid into Gaza right now. They have no plans to do so in the foreseeable future until those hostages get released. And if Hamas starves its own people to death, if people start dying of starvation in Gaza, just remember, there's 6 months worth of food in Gaza right now to feed every man, woman, and child in the whole area. But Hamas is sitting on it and won't release it. Okay? And so when you start seeing in the mainstream media that the IDF is starving children to death in Gaza, you're already hearing those stories. Just remember, they're not the ones that are doing the starving. Hamas is doing the starving. And there's a real simple answer. All they have to do is release the hostages, and then everything gets opened back up. So that's the quick update on the war in Israel. As a matter of fact, there was another Houthi missile fired out of Yemen today that set off air raids alerts all over Israel. And it was shot down. It didn't hurt anybody. We know this. I mean, this keeps happening. The Houthis keep making themselves a ridiculous sideshow in this war, while the United States continues to drop bombs on Yemen, and it's not doing much good. It's degrading their capabilities little by little, but not to the point where they're willing to stop bombing. And the amount of bombing that would have to take place in Yemen to get the Houthis to the point where they would be ready to talk peace is not something the United States has the inclination to do. We certainly have the wherewithal. We just don't have the inclination to do it, most likely. And even American generals and American military leaders have said in the last week or two, there's going to have to be boots on the ground in Yemen. Now, tell me what you think. Do you want American boots on the ground in Yemen? Even if they promised it was a limited engagement, we're just going to go in there, we're going to push through Sana'a, we're going to depose the Houthis, we're going to install the rightful Yemeni government, and then we're going to leave. Would you be okay with American Marines going into Yemen to do that mission and knowing that there's a very high likelihood that it would turn into like a Black Hawk Down situation or something like that? If not, most people are saying no. If not, then that means that we have to support the Yemeni government, the rightful Yemeni government, and for them to do it themselves. And it's questionable whether or not they even have the capability, whether or not we give them weapons. If we say, okay, we'll give you air support. I mean, look, we already have American boots on the ground in Yemen. There are some special forces in there training the Yemeni forces as we speak. There are a very small number of Americans that are in Yemen training Yemeni forces, Green Berets. But if we said, look, we'll send a few combat air controllers, CCT guys, and stuff like that in there with those special forces, just so that they can communicate with the aircraft and tell us where we need to be dropping bombs as the Yemeni forces, go attack the Houthi-held areas. That is a more likely scenario for sure than the scenario of American Marines going on the ground. But, what most people here on the chat are reflecting is that the American people have no stomach anymore for war. We don't have any stomach for an actual war because we watched American politicians snatch defeat from the jaws of victory in Afghanistan in 2020. And in so doing, really destroy, 2021. Really, it doesn't matter how good and capable and well-trained and well-led and well-equipped and well-funded our military is. If we're not willing to employ that military, one wonders why we even have it. Now, we could continue with the plan that we are on right now, which is to only use American troops, actual ground troops, as deterrent forces. So like the 1,000 troops we have here in Syria, the several thousand we have right here in Iraq, right here in Erbil, which I just saw, yesterday. I put this video up over at chuckholton.com, by the way. You can go see it. We filmed an American convoy of military equipment coming out of Syria and going to the airport in Erbil, Iraq, as a part of the drawdown in Syria. But we still have thousands of American troops in Iraq. We still have about 1,000 American troops in Syria. Those troops are occasionally in combat. They're always under threat. And they are there mostly as a deterrent. In this case, a deterrent for the Islamic State, the remnants of ISIS that are still running around this area. And so if you're saying, I'm not for sending American troops to anywhere for anything, then we need to pull all the 40+ thousand troops out of the Middle East, the 20-something thousand we've got in Korea, the 12,000 or so we got left in Germany, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Take them all home and pay them to get out of the military and go do something else. Might as well just shut the military down and only keep our Air Force, because we seem to be okay with bombing things still. And obviously what I'm proposing here is not realistic. It's really not realistic. If you want to have a secure country, it's incumbent on the government to keep a standing military force that could defend the country in case somebody decides to attack us. And we're not impervious to that by any stretch. Unfortunately, I think we're putting, this is going a little off topic, but just in my opinion, I think we're putting the onus of our military buildup in somewhat the wrong place, because war is changing, and it's changing very, very rapidly. We can see from the war in Ukraine, we can see from the war in Israel, that war has changed dramatically, and the United States is playing catch up. And we need to get with the program, because virtually all war going forward will be asymmetric, unconventional. And so it's much, much, much more likely that we will see a large-scale attack from some of our adversaries, be it Iran or South Korea, North Korea, or Russia, or whatever, or all of the above, or China. Okay, we'll see a massive multi-cell terror attack in the United States. That is a much higher likelihood than the United States having a actual ground shooting war in, like, the South China Sea or China or Taiwan or someplace like that. Now, it is likely that there will be a war over Taiwan. But what I'm saying is, China does not want to get into a direct shooting conflict with the United States. And if they invade Taiwan, that's what's going to happen. And so what they're going to try to do is cripple the United States so that we don't have the wherewithal to fight China directly, or at least not win in fighting China directly, before China decides to move on Taiwan. And the belief is that China will move on Taiwan as early as 2027, within this term of President Trump. If that's the case, then it's very likely that China and its allies, Russia, North Korea, Iran, will orchestrate some sort of massive unrest, loss of civility, generalized destruction of the power grid, the water grid, and things like that in America, in order to get America so inwardly focused that we don't have the time of day to, or the wherewithal or inclination to go to war directly in ground combat. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be successful at that, at deterring us from going into ground combat. But I'm saying that they are certainly planning to attempt it. Now, I wrote a book about this in November of last year. It came out. You can get a copy of it on Amazon, or you can go to chuckholton.com and become a supporter and get a free download of that book. And you go to chuckholton.locals.com there, and you can get a free download of the book. It's called Death of Civilization, and it talks specifically about the threats that America faces today and what you can do about it, so you can have peace of mind, so you can breathe easy, because you know that you and your neighborhood have got it locked down. You've got it covered. All right? So in the case, whether it's a hurricane, fire, flood, earthquake, generalized unrest, localized unrest, or terror attack, massive multi-cell terror attack, no matter what happens, Death of Civilization will help you be more prepared to deal with it. It's a short book. I wrote it very slowly. If you're not a fast reader, it's just for you. I wrote it very slowly so that you won't have a hard time reading it. And so I would encourage you to get that book over on Amazon, or go to chuckholton.com and do that. Also, make sure that you subscribe over at the Hot Zone with Chuck Holton. You can get more reporting from me. I do daily live updates like this one over at chuckholton.com. So if you're not a supporter over there, you want to be, you ought to be, okay? And all right, that's all I've got for today. I was kind of scanning. I didn't see a ton of questions. What, you don't think militias have formed and are already ready? Okay. Well, Outer Banks, North Carolina is ready. Okay, great. I hope you are. We should protect Taiwan. They are good people and an awesome ally. Well, we have written treaties to protect Taiwan, but then again, we had written treaties to protect Ukraine as well. And we're sort of walking away from those. As a matter of fact, I saw the video today of the speech that President Clinton gave back in the 1990s when we convinced Ukraine to give up their nuclear weapons, promising in Kyiv, he gave that speech in Kyiv, promising the Ukrainian people that the Americans would stand by them and not allow Russia to aggress on them ever again. Obviously, we didn't live up to that, and that's a stain on America's credibility, without a doubt. So that's something that we should encourage our leaders to, I feel like we should encourage our leaders to live up to the agreements that we make. You can always renegotiate those agreements if you need to, but if we have something, we made an agreement, we need to do it. The question, is your book aimed at U.S. audience or applicable to those in Europe too? Steve, it is applicable to those in Europe, just because it's based off of a military manual that trains soldiers how to go into a non-permissive environment and maintain physical security in that environment. And it's a concept called human terrain mapping. And so what I did was adapted that military manual to civilian life. So if you live in a neighborhood, if you have neighbors, then this book applies to you. And you can help make your house and your whole neighborhood safer by applying the principles that I put in that book. Okay? Okay. Port Defender, is it okay for public more specials? I always watch CBN, Chuck, TBN, some Fox, but can only stomach so much at once. I stand with Israel. Me too. UK, France. Yes, Mama Rissa, thank you for that reminder. Folks, CBN is a donor-funded organization, and they're the ones who pay for my travel to come out here to Iraq and every place else I go, pretty much. So if you want to keep us out in the field, you want to assist CBN in helping people everywhere we go, then go to cbn.com and become a supporter over there. It's something that I believe in myself, and I've worked with CBN for more than 20 years, and I've never seen anybody who's more responsible with the funds that people send to help. So, all right, that's all I've got for today. It's about 8:30 here in Erbil, Iraq, and I'm pretty jet lagged from flying across the globe to get here. So I'm going to go in and go to bed and try to get some rest, because I got to get up really early in the morning and run for the border. So pray for us. You may not, I'm not going to be able to do lives most likely while I'm in Syria. I may be able to get a few videos out. I'll be putting videos up on chuckholton.com and over at Local, so you want to go sign up over there so you can get notified if I put stuff up over there. I will be making news packages for CBN that will air on CBN's news shows and on our YouTube channel when I get back. But because of the operational security situation inside Syria, I got to be real careful about what I put out while I'm there, because we don't want to get bombed by Turkey. So there's that. All right, so I didn't die. If you don't hear from me for a few days, don't worry. I'm probably all right, but I have to be very careful, because this is I mean, Syria is a very dangerous place. It's a very, very, very dangerous place. And so say a prayer for us, and we appreciate all of you. We appreciate your support and the support you allow us to give to people around the globe as we travel and bring you the news from on the ground. So God bless you, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.